we often don't think about is the emotional burden that women go through on thinking about, oh, I can't go this way, I need to go that way, 9:30 is too late, I need to leave before that. So there's so much of thinking that goes into just traveling and traversing a city that usually I can be a far more productive using my brain for doing something else. That then takes a toll on the rest of my day as well. Women from different social class, caste, who engage with the city very differently. Like a domestic worker navigates the city very differently than I do. I know many women do think about it. It's almost like this routine of preparing for this journey. Put your bag in front, put your hands in the pocket, phone is inside. So yeah, it does take a toll. It's a lot to think about, and it's honestly it's inconvenient, it's unnecessary, and it's a burden. The one thing that stands out, at least with respect to Bombay, is that so it is the most populated city, densely populated city in India, which then you have people around you all the time. So there is no such thing as an empty street. So that really helps, right? Delhi is not like that. Delhi has a lot of dark, empty, not that well lit streets. A woman just say, for lack of a better term, hanging out is not seen as respectable, or always the question is, why are you here, why was she out? So that doesn't make it easy either, right? So then women are constantly thinking, oh, maybe I shouldn't be out.
So many incidents of women being molested and harassed in Indian cities. Why are Indian cities so unsafe? India stands 148th among 170 countries in safety for women. How do we increase safety for women? Why do we build cities which are only for able-bodied men? 50% of our population is women, and they contribute a lot to the economy. Why are we unable to build cities which include them, and not just them? Why not children? Why not elderly people? What are the cities we are building good for? So I spoke with Divya Narayanan, the executive director of Jhatkaa, about women's safety. This came out of a casual conversation we had earlier about women's safety and how we are lagging behind. And in spite of all the gender sensitivity that are being included in projects, we are not able to make any difference on the ground in the cities. This is a continuation of that conversation. Let's jump in and listen to her. So I've been trying to grapple with this whole question of women's safety. Last week also I was reading that a lot of our cities are not safe for women, and it's also not built for a lot of different types of people, right? I've always been complaining about the cities not being built for 80-year-old kids or 80-year-old people. They feel unsafe walking around, they get knocked down or whatever. You've been running a lot of campaigns, and as Jhatkaa also, you spoke up against a lot of things that have been happening against women. Do you think Indian cities are safe for women? But even before that, you can probably clarify to people how do women see the city at all? Is it built for them?
So that's a great starting point, because one of the few things we need to acknowledge. One is that the way men and women and other minority populations navigate and experience a city and engage with the city are very different. If you go down one more layer, there's also the fact that while women are not equal citizens in a city, there's also the case of not all women being equal in a city either. You have women from different social class, caste, who engage with the city very differently. Like a domestic worker navigates the city very differently than I do. So you have women who are in cars, you have women in public transport, you have women who walk, you have women on scooters. They all experience the city very differently. And so gender plays a very important role, but also there are these other sort of layers to it which makes it all the more complicated, right? And one of the things I think research has shown that more women depend on non-motorized transportation than men. So, which means there are more women who are walking or cycling or taking public transport. And then that also affects the way they see a road, the way they engage with people on the street, how they take their routes to go from point A to point B, right? Like for me, for example, Um, if I'm in a city long enough, I will figure out established patterns of and routes that work for me. I will notice which street is not safe, which is not well lit, doesn't have footpath, and then I'll sort of navigate myself in another direction. But that then affects a lot of things in my day to day, right? It delays, it takes longer if I have to take a longer route. There's also, I think, another thing that we often don't think about is the emotional burden that women go through on thinking about, oh, I can't go this way, I need to go that way. 9:30 is too late, I need to leave before that. So there's so much of thinking that goes into just traveling and traversing a city that I can be a far more productive using my brain for doing something else, and that then takes a toll on the rest of my day as well. I still come from a very privileged background, um yeah, and another thing also that comes to mind is the fact that we're not looking at mobility and cities from the lens of the economics of care, like caregiving. Like the mobility patterns of a woman who's working and undertaking like domestic care activities, caring for dependents, children, older family members, that then becomes very complex, right? And women often, the way they navigate through a city I think it's called trip chaining, if I'm not mistaken, right? There's a series of short sort of trips. Okay, go to work, then pick up child, go take to tuition, come back. There's a lot that happens that we're not taking into account. So basically, yeah, so gender roles also then determine how people navigate it as well.
Yeah, this I heard when I was talking to someone from CAG when she did that public transport thing also, is that women end up to running a lot more errands than men, and hence their trips are more disjointed and they need more flexibility. But tell me something, why do women have to traverse the city? One is because of their functions and the things they want to do. But also you mentioned, even if you are doing the same trip that a man does, you are having to think about five, six more things before you make that trip. Does it really have to be that way? What is the worry there? Is it always about safety? Is it about your physical well-being that you're
Yes,
thinking
I
about?
think so. Because for me, so I live in Indranagar. There is a street here which is called Double Road. There's one stretch of that double road that someone else also was talking about this last week, where they work near that double road area. There's one stretch that has no street, zero. And I don't like walking down that road. And it's usually a space that is not very well inhabited either. Like there's hardly any people there. So I'll go via 100 feet road, or I'll find another way to get there, or I'll take an auto. I wouldn't want to walk there, right? So I am having to think about, and there's no footpath either in that area. So I have to walk on the road with cars and bikes passing. I'm able to hold my bag in the front. Chain snatching, phone snatching, you hear all those stories. And so I do think about all of that. And I know many women do think about all that. It's almost like this routine of, preparing for this journey. Put your bag in front, put your hands in the pocket, phone is inside, so yeah, it does take a toll. It's a lot to think about, and it's honestly it's inconvenient, it's unnecessary, and it's a burden.
Have you felt this way? You've traveled to other places across the world. Is it unique in India that we feel this unsafe? Are there, of course, there might be some other cities that might be this way, but are there places you can compare to where you felt absolutely safe? And what was the difference? Is it just that physical infrastructure that was like, where did they have more lights? How would you paint that picture?
So I'll give you an example. So I am originally from Bombay. I grew up in Bombay. And Bombay has always been a place that I have seen as extremely safe. At least that was my experience growing up in Bombay. And then I've also lived in Delhi. I've moved to Delhi, then I moved to Bangalore. The one thing that stands out, at least with respect to Bombay, is that so it is the most populated city, densely populated city in India, which then you have people around you all the time. So there is no such thing as an empty street. So that really helps, right? And that's why there's like I've taken the local train at like 10:30 p.m. or even later, and I have not gotten a place to sit. I've had to stand and go because it's full, right? So with those experiences, Delhi is not like that. Delhi has a lot of dark, empty, not that well lit streets. Um, and also I felt like an outsider because I'm not from there, and so that also sort of has me be in like a state of constant vigilance. And unfortunately, that state of constant vigilance shows on your face. It's very visible, which doesn't help either. But yeah, physical infrastructure definitely. So whether it's also having like more, say, foot over bridges to be able to cross easily, having street lights. I think lights play such an important role, right? Because then if it's poorly lit, then whoever criminals or whoever want to attack you, they have a free hand there, right? But if the street is lit, they may think twice. Then that's the case with like bus stops as well. I think I heard Meera Sundarajan from the Gender Lab in Chennai Corporation talking about how even the way buses are designed, they need to think about how bus stops are designed, need to think about women, because they need to have good lighting, because most of the times the light is coming from the street light or some advertisement like a hoarding. It's not in the light is not in the bus shelter. And also how bus stops need to ideally be against a wall, so that there's no chance of people lurking behind it, right? So it has to be, and that kind of thinking will only come when you involve women in the design of it to begin with. Like even you were talking about even like public toilets, right? We were talking about this before, about how even if you go anywhere, like a rest stop or somewhere on the highway, you notice that the woman's toilet is always further inside, right? Clearly shows that it was designed by a man. Like in terms of access, we always have to go further in, and it's deserted. It may be dirty. Again, women will think twice before using a public toilet anyway, and that this makes it harder.
Culturally, also we have, as people, we don't think about this as much as we should, because I can empathize. Like I was saying, I teach in a women's college, and when I go there, there's a lot of ice. Then you feel like you are alone there. But it's fairly okay. And there was only one toilet for the guys, whereas they had toilets on every floor. Now, then the empathy starts creeping in. Is this how a woman feels in a man's world? Right? But how do you then get over these kind of things? What do you think happens? Of course, there is also this the people. One is that Delhi has more dark spots, or there might be more less crowded, let's say. There's more walking you can do, in at least in the Lutyens part of Delhi. There's nice sidewalks. Some of them are lit, some of them are not, but you have to walk for miles, because it's just compound wall and there's just one house for a kilometer or so. But more crowded cities seem to give women a better, more safer feeling, right? But are people also different? Why is it that some cities appear safer even if they are built the same, while some are not? Is there a cultural bit to this that also needs to be looked at?
I'll take it just one step back as well. There's very much a cultural aspect here and a societal aspect, because as women, we also need to keep up a respectable appearance when we're outside. Because again, the whole concept of women at leisure is not as common, right? Women are mostly outside, outdoors, with a purpose. They want to shop for something. They went to the grocery store, going to pick up their child. There's always a purpose. But a woman just say, for lack of a better term, hanging out, is not seen as respectable, or always the question is, why are you here? Why was she out? And when we see, on the news, when there are crimes against women, the the burden of blame is always on the victim. And so that doesn't make it easy either, right? So then women are constantly thinking, oh, maybe I shouldn't be out. And then we are sort of stopping ourselves. We are, then we don't have enough opportunities to do what we want, whether it's work, whether it's healthcare, whether it's, any of this, right? So, and one of the things that, as young girls that we're taught, so for example, if someone attacks me, I have two options. One is I either retaliate in some way, or I sort of cower down and sort of save myself, right? And as girls, we're often taught to do the latter, because the former can maybe then lead to worse crimes, right? Because then the attacker is not able to, he needs to prove his power and dominance over me. And so because we're taught to do the latter and not do things and sort of just deal with it in a way where we're getting used to it, that is again a problem, right? That is perpetrating things like this, right? People are not speaking up because we're not taught to from a young age. For most people, there are some, of course, women who are taught to fight back, but that's not the norm. So even in terms of upbringing, there's always this fear that if I do retaliate, it can become worse. So yeah, upbringing of women, upbringing of girls, upbringing of boys. I mean, that's something that people are starting to talk about now, about how are we talking about this with the young boys in our family, which is a very important conversation to have, about just treating women as equals, showing the same respect you would to your male friend. And that's something I'm also very curious about and want to explore maybe at some point, is that if there is someone in last week, I was at an event where this woman actually asked the men in the room, do you want to attack a woman? And they all said no. Why is that? So instead of asking, why do you want to attack a woman? Why do you not want to attack a woman? What is it in your upbringing that you don't want to do it? What is it in your value system that you don't want to do it? So, which I thought was an interesting sort of flip of that question.
Crimes against women are increasingly becoming common in large cities. It has improved quite a bit also. It's not but it's not necessarily gone down the way we think it would, because you would assume that there are far more educated people in the city. It does bring a lot of variety of people. The cosmopolitanism also leads to a lot of exposure to different things, where people see other people of different types, and you're not closeted by what you saw in your village or in your rural area. That also brings with it challenges. They see opportunities to do things. I still remember this loitering thing, that I feel that when women are waiting for Uber on the roadside, they're far more uncomfortable.
Yes.
They're always speaking to someone or doing something because they don't want to be misunderstood. There still is, and I've seen people watch, why is she waiting on the roadside? Why not? There are just three other guys waiting right there next to them. And that never raised any questions. How should we approach this topic? There isn't enough being said or done. When an incident does happen, we do all raise up and talk about it. But in general, where should we start this conversation about women should be able to do exactly the same things that a man is able to do? Why not? Where does that conversation start? Who should it be starting with?
So something like this requires really, really a multi-stakeholder approach, right? It just cannot be one or two organizations or one or two decision makers or governments talking about it, because it's affecting more than 50% of the population, and it has to be given that weightage. I heard someone say last week that she said, I can't wait for systemic change. But, and I empathize with her to a certain extent, because obviously it is frustrating, it's taking too long. But the solutions that we think about are all band-aid solutions that we're addressing the symptom, right? We're not really going to the root of the problem, which is to a large extent mindset shift. And that's going to take a long time. But there are a few things that we can do. Say, for example, even addressing, like speaking to boys, having men and boys in the conversation, I think is extremely important, starting from a very young age. Also, like the work that's being done in Chennai, for example, has been because there is a dedicated body within a municipality for gender related work around the city. So gender and mobility. So that then shows intent. They're held accountable. There's certain kind of responsibility that comes with it from an institution that's sitting within a government body, which I think is really useful. And I think it is being done in other cities as well. And also, I think like there are many organizations, multiple civic organizations, including ours, doing a lot of work in it, but it's so disparate and siloed at the moment that, I mean, unless we really come together, collective action is the only way to go ahead with this. Because just like climate and mobility and all other issues, we're sitting in our own corners and doing things and not doing things at scale. And we're really not designing our work for scale. And that's something that this issue really needs.
There is a lot of that happening in the corporates, like they talk about gender, diversity. How do you look at a lot of projects now? When you want to execute, talks about how are you including gender. And every time I look at that, I'm thinking, what should be done differently? I don't even get what should be done differently. But if you ask the women, they'll tell you, no, it needs to be different. Now, how do you, this is like the standard conundrum. Like when I talk about walking infrastructure, they say it's not even fit for the able. Why are you talking about the disabled? Right now, is that how you look at, okay, I don't even have a bus now, then we will talk about how it can be safe for women. There is some sort of a pecking order that is understood that we solve for probably able men first or some such thing. I don't know how we are looking at it. Is it difficult to try to do everything? It has to. Why can't disabled people be, why can't it be built like that right up front? Why should it be built first like this, then like that? Then why is there an evolutionary pecking order in this? Does this mean women have to wait till we solve all the problems and then we go and fix that? This government thing is interesting. How much, a lot of government organizations seem to say that let's do gender sensitive transport, gender sensitive streets, but it's a lot of words. Where do you think we should start doing? There are government projects, there is infrastructure, then there is the cultural thing you talked about, which you call societal. Let's use that word instead of cultural. Where should we start and how do we go about it? Are you happy with what is happening now on all the gender stuff?
But say, for example, the free bus scheme for women, right? Great start. Also, it opened up a lot of, it created a cascading effect in a lot of ways, because once you had more women in buses, buses got crowded. I remember seeing there was a newspaper article that showed school kids waiting outside the bus, not being able to get in because it was full. And the blame was on, women. Women are using the buses. So it's all full, kids can't get into the bus, right? But what that then showcased was the demand, that the fact that Bangalore desperately needs more buses. And, I think this was WRI or somewhere where I heard where, Bangalore is supposed to have 15,000 buses and we have 5,000 buses, right? And it showcased the demand which then we were able to show the government. Women were able to go out and step out for leisure. They were able to just go see their friends or go to a park or go to temples and all of that. And what that then did, like even the few people that I have spoken to, say even my cook at home, she was talking about how she feels buses are safer now, because the more women you have outdoors, the safer that's anywhere, the safer that space becomes. That's it. It's as simple as that, right? So she just generally, the proportion of women in buses has increased. And my cook was also like, she was also telling me about how, when she gets paid every month, she was very particular that she needed to be paid on the first because she had to go buy a bus pass. And ever since she got the free bus, she's like, oh, you can pay me anytime. I don't need bus pass anymore, right? So there's that level of, there's this liberty, and this level of freedom that it's given. And it's important to I think also look at the positive aspects of some of these things that are being done as well, to look at, okay, this is working, right? So how can we then layer that on top of something else that works? Because what we're doing over and over again is trying to create a proof of concept. Like there's already enough and more data available on what works and how things should be done. But what we're reinventing the wheel multiple times, which is the problem. And that's actually the case with many other issues as well, but this included. And also, what's important when it comes to like what needs to be done in terms of public infrastructure, buses, etc., is include women in the conversation right at the beginning, right? And that's not just women; that includes minorities, like, for example, how other queer minorities and how they experience the city, trans people, how they experience the city. So I think it is important to have these diverse voices, because otherwise we're not where we are going to be. We'll continue to design cities for men, able-bodied men, and that will be the problem.
Who are also being hurt, by the way, because it's not even fit for that. Just the cities are such a big mess. But there are basic fundamental things that what would you ask for if we were to look at cities today and make them safer? If India has to now utilize or provide the economic benefits to 50% of its population, which is women, half of the, and cities are the place where all of these economic activities come and they're able to engage even better. Uh, City design, in fact, the Bengaluru master plan is done by a woman. We both know her very well. But yet, in a lot of the decision making process, the contractors, in fact, I've heard in the civil industry, the civil construction industry, that they look down upon women. They don't even talk well to women. They don't even think that they should be building a road. What are you doing in the road construction business? That's how they look at it. And I've heard this firsthand from women who work in the civil space. You do the design, don't come on the construction on the road, right? So you get to that level and all the decisions are being made there. There is a stigma for women being in some of these jobs. And which is very interesting because city building and the contracting process and everything else is completely men driven and they're not even accepting. So how do you think our cities are going to turn out? I see that there are two aspects to this. One is the physical aspect with the government, what I think we need to do. On the societal aspect, what you say is we need to start talking to men about this, right? Or boys about this rather. Is that something that you see happening anywhere at all? I've heard of this let's loiter kind of people who are just out in the campaign space trying to create a buzz. But how do you educate now? There is a lot of education happening. Do you actually have to go to schools or can you do it
I think
outside?
it has to be a combination of both, because a lot of this is also about upbringing and about your own home, right? And how patriarchal our systems are even at home. And what you said about women not being in the, say, or not respected in the construction space, that also then means women, if they're denied work and opportunity in one place, they need to and that may be, that construction site may be close to her home and it may be convenient for her, but if she's not able to go there, she then looks for opportunity which is farther away, which is more inconvenient. So it also ties in very closely to women's work opportunities as well. And when you were talking about respect at the workplace, in that social class, I'm sure it is much more sort of entrenched. But even for me, for example, I see a very clear difference if I wear a kurta and a pant versus a sari and go for a BBMP meeting. The way I'm treated, vastly different. The minute I wear a sari, like I had a friend who actually told me, she was like, "Oh, just wear a sari. Your status will get elevated from sister to madam." And it's true. That's exactly what happened. So a lot of this is mindset change, which will then lead to behavior change. And it is going to be a long process, but I think there are a lot of things we can do, a lot of small things we can do to just see if it works. And if it works, then accept that it does, and then start looking at how do we keep layering that on. Like even Like, for example, I think just even having well-lit streets, even that tiny bit, that tiny level of change um, will have a huge impact. And also the thing is, we're all, like someone else said, I was listening to someone who was saying, we're thinking about mobility and cities as a project. We shouldn't look at it as a project. There are people's lives, right? We're talking about people's lives and the way we live our life in these cities. And so I think it has to be looked at from a very holistic perspective. Um, but there are some very simple things that can be done, definitely. And there needs to be adequate financing for this kind of work as well.
What are your prescriptions? How do you see Indian cities getting better? Do you see them getting better? Do you think we are doing anything at all that is going in that way, or do you think it's going to be a long haul? What are your wise words to try and get women more respect in the cities?
I mean, it's a long haul, but I think one thing that needs more attention and something that can be done on a more sort of regular on a regular basis is looking at communication, right? Like, how are we talking about these issues? We shouldn't be talking about this issue like, oh, this place needs a bus stop. Why? Who's using it? Why is it important? What does it change in that person's life if that bus stop is not there, right? Tell the story of that woman who's not able to go to work because she doesn't have a bus stop near her house. She needs to use a share auto to get out of her community to then take a bus, which is free. But to get there is a challenge, right? So tell these stories rather than, because that's the only way you're going to also make these issues or these facets of life cool, right? Buses are never cool. Like, even when at Jhatkaa we worked on campaigns before, on mobility campaigns, it's been really hard to get people to engage and be interested in it, because again, buses are just not cool. Like, how do you make it such that young people want to take public transport rather than aspire to for a car, right? And I think there are small things that can be done. So communication is definitely a big piece that's being ignored, and I think a lot more can be done there, because that can then really help shift mindset, and that's an important place to start.
Yeah.
And I know there are organizations who are also doing, like there's an organization called Durga, where they do bystander intervention, where they train, they do bystander intervention training for, so they have stationary and moving. So they work with, say, Uber and cab drivers, where they sensitize them to be active bystanders. And they also do it for, say, a pan wala or a grocery store owner, where a woman can then, if she knows there's an active bystander, 100 meters away, I would rather walk there and stand near the bystander while I wait for my Uber. Right? So yeah, there is some really good work being done, but I think we're not working collectively enough.
We need to get together. Let's hope we get better on the safety ratings, and we have more. I think the infrastructure piece is well taken. We have to design our cities for women, and women need to get involved. Simple things like just have all streets lit is such a simple but such effective way of starting the intervention. And it goes all the way up to societal sensitization, right, at the mass change level. Okay, let's hope we get better on safety ratings, and all our big cities at least start respecting women and show the way for how we treat them and how we treat ourselves as cities and as human beings.
Yes, hoping.